Hello, it's Harry Brook here, Ag Fieldman for Flagstaff County, and today we're talking to Tom Wolf, who is a sprayer specialist. And when I say specialist, I mean really a specialist, because there's very few people specialize in this particular area of technology.
You're listening to the official podcast of Flagstaff County.
So, Tom, let's talk a little bit about spraying and sprayer technology, because things seem to be moving along awfully quick. Used to be, when I was a kid, you had one choice for nozzles, and it was really simple, 80s or 110 degree. So what's been happening out there in the nozzle technology?
Well, I guess there's almost never been a quiet moment in the last 30 years that I've been working in this field. I started in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And, even then, Harry, there was just really the one nozzle, to be honest with you. And we were starting to spray fungicides, but we were still mostly just doing herbicides and maybe just one pass.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe some crops got a fungicide. Since that time, my clients are going over every acre maybe 4 or 5 times with everything from, the pre-seed burn off, the in-crop,
right?
And then they've got insecticides, maybe, certainly in canola, and they've almost for every crop got fungicides. And then now we're doing desiccating of some of these canola crops that are pot shatter resistant. So there's no end to the spraying. In fact, the sprayer actually runs every week of the growing season.
Well, I've noticed that it used to be that, you pull out the sprayer out of the bush once a year, clean her off, use your herbicide, and then you're done again, and that's it. And nowadays, everyone's got high clearance sprayers, and you see them out in the fields at all times. But it's not the same nozzle, is it? That they use.
No, it's not. I mean, a lot has happened. I mean, it's not just that the nozzle has changed. It's also the metering system has changed. And we've gone to pulse width modulation. It's really actually probably over 50% of the market now. It's very common, and that's pretty.
Explain that.
What? Well, pulse width modulation. One of the main problems with rate control in sprayers is that it's pressure based. If you want more flow, you have to give more pressure. And of course, there's all kinds of pros and cons to a change in pressure. More pressure makes the spray finer. Less pressure makes the pattern collapse. So as you speed up and slow down with a conventional rate control system and the pressure fluctuates, you get into these extremes. And of course, pressure and flow aren't linearly related. In other words, if you want to double your flow, in other words, if you want to go twice as fast, you actually have to quadruple your pressure. And so you go into great extremes of pressure potentially as you navigate your field, maybe up and down some hills or something, or through some low spots where you might have to slow down. And the question is the nozzle actually still working well? Pulse width modulation allows you to control the rate of that nozzle without changing pressure. So it has a pulsing solenoid on each and every nozzle. And the solenoid pulses at about 10 or 15 or more hertz times per second. And that's a constant. And then the proportion of time that valve is open, which is called the duty cycle, controls the rate.
Okay.
So now the duty cycle and the flow rate of that nozzle are in fact linearly related. And now if you go, now you have a 5-fold travel speed range that's possible, whereas before you had a 1.5-fold travel speed range was possible because of that pressure issue.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That's PWM, and it's great. It gives you individual rate control for every nozzle, so that if you go around a turn, you have turn compensation. It knows that the outer wing needs more flow. It gives it. Needs the inner wing needs less flow. It does that. And then some guys say, look, my wheel tracks don't get a lot of good control. I want more rate behind the wheels. Well, they can actually ask those nozzles to put out 20 or 30% more flow, while the other ones put out less flow, all at the same pressure. It's very handy.
Yeah, and I guess it's perfect too when you're talking about the like the green technology, where you're able to actually pick and choose which nozzle to use as it's going along electronically.
Oh, and that's the
Green
most
seeker,
exciting.
yeah.
That's the most exciting thing of all is the optical spot spray.
Yeah.
We can already buy, and some farmers in Alberta have bought the green on brown technology, which
Yeah.
commercially is known as Weed It or Trimble Weed Seeker. And those detect green weeds and then spray just the weeds. And that they use the same kind of nozzle, right? It's the same sort of instantaneous turn on and shut off of a spray. It might only be on for a few milliseconds, in fact.
So how, like, speed would be an issue on that as well, I would think. Like when you're talking that very specific green technology, green on brown, how fast are you limited by your speed because of the detection?
Yes, absolutely. So most sensors look about a meter or so ahead, and that gives about 50 to 100 milliseconds for the algorithm to make a decision about whether or not to spray. So if it senses a weed, it says, okay, that's a weed. And then it just sends a signal to the solenoid and it turns that solenoid on and off just in time. But with a meter look ahead, you can usually go up to 15 miles per hour and still get that targeting. And that's pretty impressive.
That is really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then some other ones, the newer ones, the green on green, where you're not detecting a green substance against a soil background, but instead a weed versus a crop, they have to do a little more computation, and they may need a little bit of a slower speed to allow for that computational time. But we're seeing them do it in Australia at 10, 12 miles per hour doing green on green weed seeking right now.
And what accuracy are they at?
So they're doing something called wild radish in canola, and wild radish looks a lot like wild mustard. So you can imagine it's a tough discrimination. Yeah. They're claiming 80 to 90% accuracy on a pass.
Wow.
Which may not be enough. It's in fact, if that's a noxious weed and you have no other way of getting rid of it, you may need to make 2 passes. But if you get, let's say you get 90% the first time, and then you get 90% of what you didn't get the second time, you've now got 99%.
Yeah.
Assuming that there isn't some kind of innate problem with that weed you missed, but assuming maybe it'll grow a little, it has to, obviously the dead ones have to die.
Yeah.
The targeted ones. So you might have to wait a week to go back in.
Okay. So are they actually going on a 2-pass system?
There's one farmer in Western Australia who's the first adopter of the AgriFac sprayer with the bilberry green on green system. And he gave a seminar just recently in Western Australia, which I listened to, and it was really good. And he talked about his experience, and he has in fact gone on some 2-pass systems, but I think it's field by field. Yeah. They're learning.
Well, it's even 80 to 90%. It's just the start, green on green. Who knows where we're going to be heading to?
It's going to be very exciting. I mean, first of all, obviously we'd have to have, very high accuracy. Like I said, I don't think we're when it comes to herbicide resistance and certain weeds that you want to limit the spread of, especially these new pigweeds coming in from the States, the Palmer amaranth that is already in Manitoba, the water hemp that's in Manitoba, but neither of these weeds are yet in Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Canadian horseweed
could come. We really can't afford to let those survive. So we have to have very good accuracy, and that's going to be the challenging part.
Are they doing anything along the lines of learning algorithms as they go on the commercial machines?
So with these kinds of algorithms, they are learning algorithms, but they need a training set and then an execution set. And so they and those 2 data sets can't be the same. Otherwise, you're just teaching the weed or the algorithm to regurgitate what you just told it. But no, when you spray, that is not actually a learning process.
It's already programmed in.
You don't know if you're right. You see. You don't know if you're right. There's no feedback for that.
Right.
So you have to do all of that. And I think that's really the sticking point. You have to sometimes manipulate each and every image that you use to train, so that you know exactly what the true outline of that plant is, like, on whatever background it's against, and then you have to make sure that that camera and algorithm can get it right.
So they have to have huge data sets because of variation in plant growth too.
Yeah, some of these data sets are tens of thousands of plants per species. Many tens of thousands. Yeah. And you know, I don't have the inside track on some of these, but those are some numbers that I've heard. It's not easy at all.
Oh.
And then but the pricing of it is actually very interesting. It uses kind of the inkjet way of pricing, which means they kind of sell the technology, the cameras and the solenoids and so forth, essentially at cost.
Okay.
And then they ask for a fee per acre to use the algorithm.
Ah, interesting. Because that's where actually that's the greatest expense. Once you've got the technology, it's using it. I'm wondering, just it came to my mind that, is there any pushback by people who have been buying it to sort of find other sources for the algorithms? I was just thinking, suddenly I thought of the computers in the combines, right? And there's been some movement there of the right to repair.
That's right. Well, you know, our very own Brian Tischler is, of course, a leading advocate of an open source kind of smart farming technology and auto steer and sectional controls, where he cut his teeth. But he's also been talking to a young man in Sydney, Australia, who's currently actually in Texas. His name is Guy Coleman, and he is very much into this green on green, green on brown spot spraying. He's doing his PhD down there right now in Houston, near Houston, Texas A&M University. And he has developed an open weed locator, OWL.
Oh, yeah.
It's an open source algorithm that he's asking for people to submit learning data sets to. And he actually has published instructions on how to build your own. If you can solder, and you can go to, you know, Radio Shack to buy some things. It runs on a Raspberry Pi. You know, and a Raspberry Pi is a little motherboard that's like a little mini computer, and they can be had for as little as $50.
Really?
So you can build your own very affordably, and that could be a very interesting development to do this parallel open source.
Well, I'm wondering, I have an app on my phone called Plant ID or PlantNet. And I'm wondering, is that open source? Because you basically take a picture, send it somewhere, and you'll get back pictures and identifications with a percentage basis of what it's most likely. Sometimes it's quite accurate, other times it's out to lunch. But it also requests you to send back your picture with the ID.
So everybody that has a green on green program claims that they have the algorithm or the superior algorithm or the superior data set, you know, and I think that's where the competition is going to come in. But, you know, it all sort of became interesting about 10 or more years ago when Google actually publicized its face recognition learning algorithms for their online image libraries and, you know, photo handling things for the public, where they, you know, they can tell it's you, even if it's a picture of you at 5 years old. They say, is that you, you know? And they just get smart. If you confirm that that's your training algorithm, and then they just get smarter and smarter. Now, they made those public. And all of a sudden, almost overnight, this machine learning got a shot in the arm.
Exploded.
Now, every single university in the world has a machine learning program where in a very short time, their students can have 70 or more % accuracy with learning some simple recognitions. You know, there's one place, for example, that can differentiate male and female Palmer amaranth seeds, because it's a dioecious plant. And the seeds are very subtly different, and machine learning can figure it out.
Wow. So not only can you find out how many seeds of Palmer amaranth you have in your sample, it can even tell you the sex of them.
Yeah, I don't know what use that would be, but it's interesting, isn't it?
Used in plant breeding, I don't know.
I heard a radio program the other day where they talked about machine learning in health, and they said they basically trained an algorithm to look at an X-ray of a joint, and then to predict the pain that the patient feels with that kind of an injury.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pain algorithm.
I guess you could say it's a pain in the
front,
joint.
in the front of the line or the back of the line for surgery, I guess.
Well, that is really, that's cool. What they're doing. I know it's a little off our topic, but still, it's interesting. We seem to be living in a time with so much change in technology affecting us. I notice you, along with lots of other people, are working on using drones for spot applications of herbicides. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I was nervous about drones in spraying because I'd only seen the videos of them doing it in Asia, and I thought that they're using a really fine spray and it's going to drift all over the place and everyone's going to get into serious trouble.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I wasn't sure how good these drones were or how easy they were to fly. Since then, I've bought a drone, and I'm a certified pilot myself at basic only, but and I realized that these drones can be flown quite easily and are actually quite foolproof. We started a working group actually in North America. It's actually Canadian. It's actually out of Lacombe at a Strongfield Environmental.
Okay.
Corey Southam is the chair of that working group, and it's we meet monthly. Not so much in the last couple of months, but we certainly have regular updates. And we're just trying to figure out, how we're going to do this thing. And I'm so pleased to hear the discussion in that working group that we're basically all in agreement that spray drift management is a top priority.
Yeah.
We're not interested in drifting with these things. And of course, the regulators won't allow it if it does drift. They just want to know how much do they drift. That's what kind of the big question right now. And so we do have to answer those questions and maybe some research. But I think once it's approved, then it'll depend on the individual registrants to see whether they want their product applied by a drone. So it is actually in their court. Some people think, once drones get approved, we'll spray everything by drone. No, it's still going to be product by product.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a little bit like the aerial business with piloted aircraft, where herbicides are going to be the highest risk products and fungicides and insecticides much lower risk from an environmental perspective, a liability perspective. And so we may not see as many herbicides as people might hope to see. Well, time will tell.
Well, I think just thinking about it makes me think that it would be applicable in a herbicide situation if you have very few plants. That might be fairly distinctive from other green on green plants, right? So then you could actually pick and choose, and if there's very specific, the application method so that it could be assured that it hits just that, say, 6 inches square patch where that weed is growing. Then you could use something that, you could use a full spectrum herbicide to kill just that spot.
It's going to be really hard to do that accurate spot spray with a drone because the multi-rotor drones create quite an interesting flow field.
Right.
And even if you only activate a single nozzle underneath that device, there's a lot of turbulence. It gets spread quite a bit.
Right.
The drones will be flying about 10 feet off the ground, roughly, give or take. And that means there's going to be lots of opportunity for that little spot spray to disperse in that turbulent air.
Ain't gonna work that way, yeah.
We have looked at some research, and I've certainly done some demos been at some demos where they'll hover a drone, and they'll release a jet of spray, and they'll have the ground marked with water sensitive paper so you know where that spray went, and then they'll land the drone, and then we go and inspect. And that jet would cover an area, couple of meters by a couple of meters, or even more, maybe 3 meters by 3 meters. It depends obviously on the spray and the height and all that, but that's about as spot spray as you can get.
Okay, so it's not that pinpoint accuracy because of course the turbulence. So
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be, because
Yeah.
the drone has lots of utility on the farm.
yeah,
For example, let's assume that there's a part of the field that you couldn't spray because of wind or moisture, but the field is 15 miles from your yard. Are you going to haul the sprayer out there to do that one pass? No, but you could take a drone out there to do it. So you can
Okay.
take care of problem sites that are otherwise difficult to reach, and you can get the job done, whereas otherwise you probably would just leave it.
Yeah.
A lot of aerial applicators, custom applicators have drones now, and they do it for that as well. They clean up the spots where it's difficult to fly an aircraft at 140 knots,
Right.
but a drone, no problem.
So how big a capacity are we talking?
Growing all the time. So we've been flying drones in Alberta, for example, doing some calibrations this past summer that have a capacity of about 22 to 25 liters of liquid. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's not bad. There's a company in the US called Rantizo that does drone application of sprays where it's legal, and they are currently working in 24 of the states.
Wow.
They fly swarms of drones, 3 drones simultaneously, 1 pilot, and they're only staggered so that you don't get a lineup at refilling time.
Yeah.
But they spray about 20 feet per drone, so that's 60 feet of width, and they're doing a good 40 to 60 acres per hour, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
Now we're getting up into the productivity of a proper sprayer. Not quite, but not bad, right?
Well, especially if it's a difficult area you can't get into.
Oh yeah, and these drones, because of their downwash, they actually have air assist built in. I mean, it's quite impressive.
Yeah.
There's a lot of vegetation that moves when they fly over.
Okay, so that would be part, I guess, the utility of it, especially when you get into something like fungicides or maybe insecticides, because insects tend to move in from the outside edges.
Yeah.
That they would have a good use there as well, possibly.
For me, it's all about. So environmental protection is, of course, number one. That's a prerequisite. We don't have to say that, but it's all. The currency of agronomy for me is timeliness.
Yes.
Agronomy is all about doing the right thing at the right time, and missing that window is, of course, the biggest mistake. It
costs a fortune.
Yeah, it can cost a fortune. So the example I sometimes think about when I talk about productivity with my clients is, let's assume that you've got a big day ahead of you. Let's say you've got to spray 1,000 acres, just to pick a round number. You got a good spray day, but because you're filling and transporting a lot, you lose some time, and the last quarter never got sprayed, but there's bad weather coming. Now, what is the cost of not spraying that quarter if you've got, say, a 5-day wait before you can get back into the field? Well, in those 5 days, those weeds grow bigger. Those weeds start to compete. The crop knows the weeds are there, and there's irreversible yield potential that's lost. And by the time you get to spray that field, you might have lost 2, 3, 4 bushels per acre. Well, that's $10,000, $5,000, whatever that number is. That's how much it costs you to not be super productive per hour, or two. It's a big price to pay. A drone can fit in there and help out, possibly. It's just maybe a second spray. It might not seem like a big second spray, but it's a second spray that can do some things. And of course, this swarming is legal. Swarming is already legal under Transport Canada rules. Up to 5 drones can be flown simultaneously by a single pilot.
Oh, wow.
You have to maintain line of sight, which could be a challenge. And a lot of drone pilots do have spotters, which is also legal. Sometimes a requirement. But yeah, I think this is going to be an exciting space, actually.
Especially for difficult patches. See, in our county, I've seen an awful lot, for the short time I've been here, there's been an awful lot of brush being cleared. Sloughs, they're trying to fill them in. So it's all about field efficiencies.
Yeah.
So frankly, I tend to like to see a little bit of bush left around.
We need it. It's a big part of our functional ecosystem. It creates a sponge. The field that absorbs moisture, handles it, releases it slowly. It's important. The wildlife corridors. The thing is, A lot of people get sort of the wrong idea when we talk about productivity, and they want to go faster, they want to go straighter, and admittedly that does help, but it doesn't help as much as you think. In our analysis, less than half the time that the sprayer is operating is spraying time, and the other 50, 60, 50, 65% of the time they're idling. They're either transporting or filling or cleaning or servicing. And reducing that idle time is actually where the productivity reservoir is. You can, if you fill faster and clean more effectively, you don't have to drive fast to get a lot of acres done. You just have it's like a NASCAR pit stop.
You just have to have a good pit crew.
You do. And you have to pay attention to detail. Like you have to want to gain every minute. And a minute doesn't seem like much, but look at it this way. How much time do you think on a quarter section the average sprayer spends turning at the headlands? About 20% of the total time on that field
really
is turning time. Now, if you can turn faster, and I'm not saying pedal to the metal, I'm just saying, think about a sprayer that has four-wheel steer, that doesn't plow when you turn with a heavy load, that you can turn tighter, maybe you'll still use one headland, but maybe a little faster. Maybe you've got a sprayer feature where the boom raises automatically when you're entering the headland, so you don't have to worry about the outer wing touching the ground.
Yeah.
All those kinds of things might save you 5 or 10 seconds per turn, but you're going to do hundreds of turns in a day.
Oh yeah.
It could be an hour that you save. It's possible.
One thing I notice in some of our fields is like like at the headlands, especially onto the road allowances, I see a lot of overspray on it's a road allowance, so it's county responsibility. And they keep spraying out the grass in these little half moon shapes, right? Which then gives an opportunity for weeds to develop. And I thought the normal way of spraying was you do once around the outside, then you can go back and forth to, basically you prevent any overspraying, which is also a waste of chemical.
It is. And, I would say we're getting back to pulse width modulation. I mean, the individual nozzle control, which gives you individual nozzle sectional control. And of course, with rate controllers and, the prescription maps and the so-called painting, we really have stopped doing what you described with those sprayers. The sprayer shuts off automatically when you enter the headland. And if it doesn't, it will certainly recognize that it's over the edge of the field and will turn those sections off. So there's a lot of good technology that actually is helping protect the environment, I guess. But we have to map those, and we have to say, all right, the slough is a no spray zone, and if our boom hangs over the slough, it shouldn't be spraying into it.
There's some interesting research that's been done around sloughs and buffer zones around them too, showing them as pollinator habitat. You get increased yield coming from those pollinators, especially in canola, within about the first 30 meters. So it dismays me sometimes when I see so much trying to be obliterated so that it's just one solid field.
I agree. Yeah, I remember, Greg Sekulich, when he was with the Canola Council, talked about exactly that. He talked about diversity actually increasing yields and the parts of the field that are adjoining naturalized areas are actually the higher producing areas of the field. It's counterintuitive to a lot of people. And then there's, of course, the other side of that coin. There's economic analyses that say that, look, there's some marginal areas in your field where you actually shouldn't be putting inputs into those. You should actually not be farming those because you're actually losing money on those few acres. Why not stop tilling and seeding and just let them regenerate into their natural areas? Your profitability actually goes up when you do that.
Well, there's been a lot of smoke in the countryside this fall because it's been so dry. Guys are burning these bulrush patches, right? And these sloughs that are dry at the moment. But all we need is a good snowfall, and she's going to be full up again next spring. Waste of time and effort.
I agree. Yeah.
But
But,
anyways,
it's with land the price it is. I can certainly understand that if you have a quarter in pothole country and you're only really cultivating 120 of those acres, pushing some
the
sloughs
pressure.
in, buys you
Yeah.
land pretty cheap. So I can understand that.
Oh yeah, and
I
it's
know people who do it.
that plus combined with exorbitant prices right now for the crops. Let's admit it, the greed influence is definitely active right at the moment.
I wouldn't call it greed. I mean, it's an opportunity.
Well, I guess, yeah.
You know,
Sorry, but
it's you never know when it's going to go bad again, right?
well, and it's all we have to do is have 1 or 2 years of wet conditions to take us back to pothole country.
Well, I mean, frankly, I'd love it if it rained a little.
No, me too. We could sure use it, that's for sure. I was going to ask you about, we haven't really talked about nozzles and nozzle types, and how there's lots of different nozzles. What would be a good overall nozzle to use for herbicides, for for either in crop or maybe even pre-seed, or would you use different ones?
Yeah, I mean, everyone needs that one nozzle that sort of does it all, right? And there is that nozzle actually does exist,
Really?
which is the good news. So every single manufacturer of nozzles worldwide makes this nozzle. It's called the low pressure air induction nozzle. That's sort of its generic description. TJet's version is called the TJet AIXR. Greenleaf has one called the Air Mix. Air Bubble Jet cut its teeth on the one nozzle that they make, which is exactly that kind of a model. Hypro has one called the Guardian Air. John Deere has the same nozzle as the Guardian Air. They just call it the Low Drift Air, different name, same nozzle. And there's others I probably haven't mentioned. Leckler is in the country with a ceramic tip. They make one called the IDK. Even Airag is coming into Western Canada. They're an Italian company. And produce those same nozzles also. What these nozzles do that I like is at an intermediate pressure, and by intermediate I mean a pressure that's right in the middle of their recommended operating range. That's kind of the pressure you should be at. So these nozzles will run somewhere between 30 and about 100 psi. Yeah, 100. With their design, even at those high pressures, you don't have to go to 100, but let's say you go to 70 or 80, even at those high pressures, they don't actually produce a very drift-prone spray. Unlike a conventional technology. So they're quite drift proof at high pressures. So at an intermediate pressure of say 60 or 70 PSI, which is kind of where we think we should target our operating pressure, they produce a coarse spray, which is quite low drift. And yet it's not so coarse as to create a coverage problem. This is the go-to nozzle. And I actually don't have a strong preference. Everyone has a local supplier that has a certain selection of brands. Ask them for the low pressure air induction tip. Some of the ones I've mentioned will be the ones that they'll come back with. Get those. They run about $10 or $12 each, sometimes even less. That's a bargain.
So what would you use when you're applying fungicide? Because I've done some field surveys with pea fields, right? And how do you get the fungicide down to the base of the plant where the ascochyte is already getting established? How do you protect that plant?
It's very difficult. It is a challenge, especially when you're talking about, you mentioned ascochyta, chickpeas, very, very densely foliated like lentils. Yeah. Peas are a little more open, so a little easier. My rule of thumb is as follows. Take a bird's eye view of the canopy, look straight down from the top. That's what the nozzle sees. That's what the droplets see. If you can actually see with your eyes the stem or the leaves in the canopy that you need to hit, then you're probably going to be okay with a single nozzle and conventional water volume, because the droplets will go line of sight and they will hit that part. But in most cases, aren't that easy. So you imagine the lentils, for example, very, very umbrella-like canopy on closure. You need 2 additional tools now, maybe 3. The first of them, because it's the most important, is really water volume. Yeah. It's a probability game. The more water you put in, into the canopy, the more likely it is that droplets will reach that furthest down region. That's really it.
Okay.
There's a strong reduction in droplet numbers with depth in the canopy. It's something that you can't really get around. So water is number one. I know people in some of those dense canopies that go to 20 gallons per acre with fungicide. Some have gone higher, just to be sure, because it's worth protecting the crop. The second thing is when droplets have to make a turn to reach the target, and that's why I did the visual thing.
Yeah.
You need a small droplet. Big drops can't make that turn. They hit the first thing they see. Small drops are aerodynamically nimble, and they can move around some of those leaves and kind of get beyond them. So a finer spray. And lastly, and this is probably the least effective, but possibly a tool, and that is the twin nozzle, a forward and a backward pointing. And the reason I say it's probably the least effective is because most of the time our booms are simply too high for that forward and backward trajectory to actually last
Too much. Yeah.
long enough. Even
Right.
20, 30 inches is relatively long for those droplets. And so they deflect in the travel and wind, and they end up just moving as a general cloud. So, there's maybe much to do about nothing. The twin nozzle has a real place in a different situation, which is fusarium head blight. But for dense canopies, the jury's out on whether it does anything. It's really a water volume and droplet size game.
Okay. So you mentioned the fusarium head blight, and that's a problem when you're trying to spray something that's standing sort of straight up.
Yeah.
You do need to have those side effect.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's the wind that does it for you. There's usually a breeze, and if your boom is a little high, the spray cloud will move in the direction of the wind. And usually, when we look at our targeting, we always notice that the majority of the deposit is actually on the windward side of that head, no matter how you sprayed it. Right. So,
it's good. Some things actually work for your benefit.
That's right. They do, and sometimes you'd have to chill and say, let the wind do the work. But often we want to cover both sides of the head. The fungicides are typically not well translocated. They are locally systemic, as we call them. So they really have to hit the side of the plant that they have to protect. They're not going to move to the other side of the plant or the head. So that forward backward attack is important, and low booms are important. Slightly coarser sprays in this case are important, just so that they get the targeting accuracy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was at a meeting a while back where you did a presentation on just the variation in height, boom width, or whip, I guess, as you're driving along a field. Because they're not paved like a highway. And I found it very interesting, some of the variation in application rate that happened in those situations.
We still have a really serious problem with our spray booms. The boom is, of course, such an important part of the sprayer.
Right.
The nozzle has to be the right height. It's for penetration, for deposition uniformity because of the overlap and the patternation. Also for drift control. Really powerful way to control drift is to have a low boom. And yet it seems to be so difficult for our boom manufacturers, our sprayer manufacturers, to deliver a boom that holds its height reliably, that you don't have to be afraid for. And I think that's fruit that's ripe for the picking. The company that tackles this problem successfully will be sought after. I would say that product will be sought after.
Because it seems to me that we're moving to wider and wider sprayers, which only just exacerbates the problem. It's okay if you've got a tabletop field, but if you got any hills or swales and stuff, all of a sudden your topography also is going to be affecting the spray.
Yeah. And just look at this. I was in Crossfield in I think it was September, I guess. I was in Crossfield, looked at a new sprayer. It's a Horsch sprayer. It's a German sprayer. It was at a dealership there, and I was invited to go look at it. And it has a very cool boom. So it's actually being promoted as a low boom machine.
Oh yeah.
With narrow nozzle spacing, 10-inch spacing, and maybe only 10 or 15-inch boom height. So very nervously low. And of course, with a regular sprayer, you'd be crazy to try that because you'd hit the ground and it'd be all over the place. it has a very unique articulation. It doesn't just swivel at the center rack, so where the wing goes up and down. It also has another one halfway out that can go up or down at that point. So it can actually bend down across a knoll. It reaches up to the middle of the knoll, and then it goes down the other side with the outer wing. And it can do that, and vice versa in a gully. So very adaptive. And I watched it do its thing. The jury's still out in terms of how well it's going to work in our challenging terrain. But this company is paying attention to what farmers actually need, and I think that's what it is. To me, the prerequisite to success in any endeavor is to understand your client. Right. That's what I spend most of my time doing, is to try to understand farmers. And I grew up on a farm, but that doesn't take me into the present and the future. I need to understand what they're up against right now. And I know that people are frustrated with boom height control, and that has to be addressed. And I don't think that the sprayer manufacturers are listening. I don't actually think that they know their clients. So that's a serious problem.
It's more of a marketing push than a customer draw.
Well, we have an oligopoly. Yeah. We have a handful of manufacturers, and they don't have to try too hard to have market share. There's a tremendous amount of brand loyalty too. Yeah. I remember I was listening to a discussion by a fellow by the name of Dan McCann. Now, Dan McCann runs Precision AI. It's a little company in Regina, Saskatchewan, and they do the drone thing, and they do artificial intelligence too. And he's not from ag. And he said this, he said, what's interesting is if you gain the farmer's trust, unlike almost any other industry, you may have a generational loyalty. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because the same thing applies. You talk to farmers in their trucks. They always stick to the same brand. It's, oh, you're driving a Ford, found on road dead.
But it's so true.
Yeah.
If you have a dealer that gives you a service and looks out for your interest, you're gonna return that with loyalty, and that gets passed down the generations, doesn't it?
Color of machinery, you bet.
You bet it does. Yeah. And I've got certain things, certain biases in my life. It's because of how I grew up.
Oh yeah.
And you don't quite let go of that so quickly. Very interesting observation. He said, in the startup world with electronics and stuff, there's gizmos, and you have logarithmic or exponential growth very soon, and then it peters out, and you have a short product lifetime. And so the challenge is to make the most of what you have in a very short time. He says in ag, it's completely different
model.
Start slow, be careful, develop trust, deliver what you promise, look after your clients, grow with them, learn from them, help them when they need your help, and you will have their business for a long time.
That's very good advice.
I loved hearing that. It was really cool to hear that from someone on the outside.
Well, and it's a different, you think of farming, it's such a different industry than almost any other, because a lot of it is based on relationship.
Yeah. It still is, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, it is, definitely.
We all yearn for it. I'm itching to go to Alberta later this month. I'll be at some meetings, and that's where we build those relationships and those linkages, and that's where a lot of things happen. Yeah.
That's where the rubber hits the road.
Sure does.
Definitely. Yeah. Or the spray hits the weed, as the case may be.
It's great. What I love about Western Canada is, we might have 100,000 farmers in the area, but we really are a fairly small community.
Oh,
and
yes.
We can call each other up. Everybody has friends in every part of the prairies.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tom. Have I missed anything of importance? I'm sure I have.
But we'll have to come back.
Sure, why not?
We should talk about you should find someone to talk about the cost of equipment.
Oh, I don't know if that's economists. They start talking about numbers and people just glaze over.
I was clearing out my filing cabinet earlier today and came across some pictures in an envelope, and it was pictures of my dad spraying a field, and he was driving a Ford 1-ton with a Marflex sprayer. The 1-ton came from the oil fields, it cost him $3,000. It was obviously used and stuff. The Marflex cost him $8,000 from North Dakota. He sprayed his 2,000 acres with that sprayer. And that was in the 80s. That wasn't that long ago.
No.
And now, if you wanted to buy a sprayer off the lot, you'd have to spend $500,000 at least.
Which kind of drives the size of the farm, I guess.
It's a whole other topic.
Yeah, that is a whole other topic. Well, thank you, Tom. Can I get your contact information so that if people do have questions, could they phone you? Or
absolutely.
Text you,
so the best way to reach us is through Sprayers 101, which is our free website, which is actually sponsored by the Growers Commissions. So Alberta wheat, Alberta wheat and barley, I guess now.
Yeah.
Alberta canola, Alberta pulse growers, and then the other provinces as well with their commissions are sponsoring the website, so we don't have to advertise and we don't accept money from anyone who sells anything.
Mm-hmm.
The website is sprayers101.com. It has articles on spraying, and then at the bottom of each article is a button you can push to email me or Jason,
Wonderful.
my partner in the website. He's in Ontario, or to tweet us.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tom. I've really enjoyed this talking to you and finding out where technology's, where it's kind of at now and where it's going.
You bet.
We haven't even talked about autonomous sprayers, have we?
No.
I don't think, I know Dot's got one, sort of.
It's called the Omni now, the Raven Omni.
Okay.
They've renamed it because they bought the company, but it's going strong.
Okay. Well, we'll keep posted to other things. Thank you again, Tom. Really appreciated it.
Thank you, Harry.